It was very nice of him to do this on short notice because our speaker previously was going to be Justin Rogers, so we're going to get him for the next one.
Okay, for January?
For January. Little does he know that yet. So, but anyway, Ryan did this for last minute, so thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
Lady, gentlemen, thank you. As Chris mentioned, I'm Major Ryan Curl, the Minnesota National Guard. I was the logistics officer and mentor for OMLT IV. Currently, I'm assigned as Deputy Logistics Officer with Training Support Unit up at Camp Ripley. And on the civilian side, I'm a Senior Business Analyst at Optum, part of the United Health Group. Operational Mentoring Liaison Team. Today, I'd like to cover the mission overview, talk about our team organization, the training timeline, the timeline from start to finish, what got us actually into country, our area of operations, talk about some of the advantages and challenges that we faced. Time permitting, I also want to talk about Kalajungi, which is right outside Camp Span where we're located, as well as some of our interpreters. Kalajungi, I think, gives some really good context to the area we were in. And our interpreters, kind of what happened to them after we left, I think gives some context of what we can see in the future for military forces as we draw down from Afghanistan and what we've seen in Iraq. I also want to mention, as Chris mentioned, we were the 6th OMLT. The first one was approximately 2007, 2008. We were also the last mentoring liaison team in there, and our deployment was cut short. We were scheduled to be there 9 months in country. We were only there 4 months in country. In fact, the day we got boots on the ground, we got the first email saying that our deployment was going to be canceled. So, my feelings were not hurt. Mission overview. We're a NATO mission to provide training and mentorship to key leadership of an Afghan National Army battalion. We were a mixed group as part of a NATO mission, so it was a combination of Minnesota National Guard and then our sister country, Croatia. It was 12 U.S. members and then 15 Croatians. And then we're there to provide support to a newly formed BSTB, Brigade Special Troops Battalion within the Afghan National Army, based out of Camp Shaheen in the vicinity of Mazar-i-Sharif, Afghanistan. Here's our team organization. All the U.S. members, I put U.S. flags behind them and then Croatian flags behind the Croatian team members. So we fell under, once we left the United States, we actually fell under the guidance of Croatia. They had command and control of us. We were ADCON to another unit for administrative support and personnel support while in country, but all of our command and control came from Croatia. Our executive officer, as well as our senior NCO, were American. Most of the staff officers were American. We had one intelligence officer from Croatia, and then if you look at the company mentorship, almost all that came from Croatia, and we had one American, an E8 as the headquarters mentor. We also had drivers assigned to us. All of our drivers were dual-hatted, and that was something that was learned, I think, within the first or second rotation. Because we're such a small group and we have to provide our own internal support rather than bringing, say, an infantry NCO or a combat arms NCO, it actually made more sense for us to bring somebody with a secondary skill set so they could be a driver as well as a mechanic, or a driver as well as our RTO. So, and that just augmented our skill set that much further.
Ryan, was the whole U.S. component there then from Minnesota?
Yes,
Okay.
yes they were, sir.
Yeah.
So here's a picture of our group. This is at Hohenfels. It's a Joint Multinational Readiness Center. This is the first time we actually got to meet them in person. We've been mobilized for a month and a half at this point. And we've been training together for about 7 months at that point. This is the first time we actually got to meet them in person. Yeah, motley crew. Little side note, the Croatian uniform, if you look at it, their camouflage pattern is the shape of Croatia. Most of the, in fact, all the members on our team and most of the Croatians we worked with had fought in the Homeland War. They've been drafted at the age of 16 or younger and fought in the Homeland War, so they had a lot of national pride. Understandably so. Our training timeline. From October to February. October is when our team was first constituted. From October to February, we did training on either drill weekends or annual training in February. We focused on your common soldier tasks, weapons training, U.S. weapons training, convoy operations, beyond the yellow ribbon events, the basic stuff to get us out the door. Once we were mobilized in March, we went to Fort Polk, Louisiana, Tigerland. That's where we did a lot of our cultural training. We learned some basics of Dari, a lot on the Muslim and Afghan culture as well. A little bit of SEER training. We did some weapons training, but mainly on AK-47s. And so some of the weapons we see with our Afghan allies. Once we were complete there, so a month later, we went to JMRC in Germany. There we linked up with our Croatian partners for the first time, got to meet them and start doing some team building there. We were put into doing mentoring exercises, and I didn't have Afghans there for us to mentor, so instead we were mentoring Albanians and Ukrainians. Not sure how that worked out, but that's what we mentored. The Albanians were eventually going to be going to Afghanistan as well. In fact, I'll talk a little later, but we had our Albanian security forces providing security on Camp Spain where we were at. So we took that as an opportunity to train them as best we could on military weapons and U.S. doctrine. Ukrainians, they were there.
Ryan, when you went to Fort Polk, were there other OMLT teams down there going through the same thing, or were you just down there on your own?
No, there were other OMLT
Okay.
teams there. And there were other OMLT teams at Hohenfels as well.
Okay.
We were one of two that were split U.S. NATO allies. There was, I think it's Indiana. Their sister country is Hungary.
Okay.
And so they were there with Hungarians, almost the same makeup as we had. We were there with Croatians. Otherwise, it was all non-U.S. forces, primarily Germans.
How many total days post-snow between when you started and until you got to Afghanistan?
It was just shy of 3 months, sir.
And how much of that was spent in Croatia?
In Croatia, we only spent 2.5 weeks in Croatia, sir. Roughly. And honestly, the Croatians were on leave most of that time.
No.
So
Why not?
I love when a training program comes together like
it
that.
was a good time to do some cultural exchange.
Yes, it was, yes.
And then so the end of May is actually when we were in Afghanistan. We were boots on the ground in Afghanistan on Memorial Day. So this is our area of operations. Just to orient yourselves to Afghanistan. We've got Kabul right here, Kandahar down here, and then up here, Mazar-i-Sharif.
You were in a good area.
And it was a good area.
Well,
It was the good area, about as good as you can get for Afghanistan.
that's why you got sent home early. Because it was the good area. If it had sucked, they would have left you there for the whole 9 months.
Well, and NATO forces were run by Germans up in that area. I mean, U.S. forces were there, but the actual NATO operations were run by Germans. That's in the Balkh province. Here's a close-up of Mazar-i-Sharif. In the center, you'll see the Blue Mosque. I'll talk about that in a little bit. We have Camp Marmal, which was a joint NATO-U.S. Installation logistics hub, which is good to have that close by for supplies as needed. Kalajungi is over here to the east, to the west, and then Camp Spain, Camp Shaheen. A little bit Mazar-i-Sharif, it's capital of Balkh province. Population was 375,000 in 2006. Actually, it's probably more now. Trade was agriculture, or economy was based on trade, agriculture, sheep farming. Saw a lot of farming that year, and thankfully it's been a wet year. And I think that's actually kept insurgent activity down because of it having a prosperous year agriculturally. So. Main religion is Shia, although they've got a large Sunni group there as well, although there isn't really a Sunni-Shia rift there. There's very little infighting amongst those religions, the sects within that religion. Primary language is Dari, although the majority of Afghans that we worked with within the ANA spoke primarily Pashto. So they're very fortunate to have an interpreter that can speak both very well. They have 5 universities, 3 hospitals. It's the 4th largest city in all of Afghanistan. As far as Afghanistan cities go, it's fairly nice. It has some nice amenities to it. It had been a primary base of operations for the Russians when they had occupied. It was the last place that the Taliban had taken over, and it was the first place that got taken from them when we started the war. Just some weather information on it. It's a hot, arid area, much like any other hot, arid area. It says the max temperature is 114 Fahrenheit. Our temperature gauge said otherwise.
What, like 80?
It's, no, we
Oh,
were up
higher.
higher, yes, sir. It's known as the grave of Hazrat Ali, the son-in-law of Muhammad, praise be upon him. That's where his grave is located in the Blue Mosque, as well as I mentioned Kalajungi, which is a fortress that's been there for thousands of years. It had been a main fortress for the Taliban as well, and then they were kicked out. It was turned into a POW base. We'll talk about the Battle of Kalajungi later, how that worked out. It is still being used, and we did get a chance to tour it. I'd like to show some pictures. It's neat to go see a battlefield 10 years after the battle actually happened. It's also the home of Baskushi, which is considered the predecessor to a lot of modern sports, including soccer. Instead of taking the head of the goat, they take the body without the head, and they pass it around on horseback. If you want to see an example of Baskushi, it's in Rambo 3. Rambo plays Baskushi with the Afghans. But that is considered Baskushi was invented, and they have a major Baskushi tournament every year in February. And I already mentioned it's the first city to fall from the Taliban control after 9/11. So here's some pictures of the city. Here's the Blue Mosque. It's gorgeous up front, up close. This I thought was interesting. If you can see the billboard, it is an Afghan woman on the left and an American soldier on the right, saluting. The rough translation of it. The rough translation is, "We are here to serve you with the help of our U.S. partners." And you can see propaganda like this on a lot of different places around Mazar-i-Sharif.
We call that the truth. We don't call that
It's-
propaganda.
Paid for by us? I mean, is that our civil affairs guys putting all these billboards up?
I don't know, sir. I don't know if that's true. I know there was a lot of billboards. When I say propaganda, what I'm actually more making reference to in my own head is pictures of Masood, the Line of Panjshir, also known as the Line of the North, who drove out many of the Russians. He's considered a war hero amongst the Afghans. They would have billboards with him on one side, and they would have Hamid Karzai on the other, and trying to equate the two together. And that was pretty common all throughout. But Masood, you would see pictures of him almost anywhere. A lot of the truckers had pictures of Masood up in their windows. He's considered a very local hero. He's from that area. He would actually drive the Russians into the mountain areas and take them on there. He would force their tanks in, and then they could battle and actually defeated them.
Was it that clean? I mean, the 3 pictures you showed us are really absent trash, water bottles, and dogs.
Oh, there was plenty of dogs
kids
there.
and stuff like
Look, these are pretty clear pictures. There's
that. Yeah, I
plenty
mean,
of
the
trash
last two,
there.
there was nothing, in terms of that kind of clutter, that sort of Iraq City clutter that's.
Personally, I saw plenty of trash. It depends on what part of the city you're in. If you're in the more residential areas, there's a lot more trash that wasn't taken care of nearly as well, especially the outskirts of it. As you got into the city, it was a lot less cluttered. They had really nice roundabouts with like big statues promoting different things. They had a Baskushi statue in one of the roundabout areas that we would go through. The fact that they would have public art, I think, speaks to the size of the city itself, and also the area that it hadn't been destroyed yet, and how quiet for the most part it had been. And I attribute that more to it's just very difficult to reach from the other major cities within Afghanistan. Right, here's Camp Span and Camp Shaheen. Camp Span is actually on Shaheen. So the red square is Camp Shaheen. The little green square right here is Camp Span. So we were surrounded by Afghans. The Afghan National Army was around us. They provided our outer border for security, and then we had our own inner security within Camp Span. Camp Span is, from my own perspective, about the size of a postage stamp. 37th BCT out of Ohio National Guard was our mayor's cell, and that's where we were ADCON to. They were also part of the troop surge, and so when they were part of that surge drawdown, that's who we were ADCON to. That's why our orders were cut short. We honestly assumed that we would just be ADCON to another unit, and we expected that for about 2 months. And then it got to the point where we were about a month and a half out from when they were leaving, and we were going to have to leave with them, and so we just ended up packing up our things. It's never changed. I can get back to that, but the Croatians did stay there, and we had some Germans that were able to flex some of their bandwidth as far as mentoring some of the battalions and do some mentorship with our battalion as well. So, Corps mentors were primarily made up of U.S. Forces, Norwegian, German, and civilians. Brigade mentors were all German, and then within Camp Span there was Croatian, German, and Canadian advisors, and then, as I mentioned earlier, we had Albanians as our installation security. They were very good about making sure that your vehicles were locked, and if you left anything in there, they were unlocked. They were very good about securing it and never giving it back. This is a picture of Camp Span I took from a helicopter as we were taking off from the launch pad. This is all of Camp Span. You can see it, and you could walk across it in about 5 minutes. That was an adjustment for me in my previous deployment. I've been at Balad. Just slightly different. So there's no indoor-outdoor pool. I was broken hearted. And over here, the red you can see is that is the Camp Croatia. So we had our own little compound off the side. And beyond that is just open land that anybody could walk up to. So that was the security level we had. There were guard posts in strategic areas that you could see people walking up if you wanted to, but if the guard wasn't paying attention, we were rather vulnerable at times. Camp Shaheen was the headquarters for 3rd Corps. And 3rd Corps covered all of the bulk province primarily, but it covered some of the provinces to the left and right of it as well, to the east and west. I had 2 different brigade headquarters there as well. 10 battalions were located on there. 7 of those battalions were combat arms, 3 of those were combat service support, and there was 1 Cashman combat hospital. So they had, facility-wise, they had actually really nice facilities. The place had been built up very well. Unfortunately, the maintenance and the care of it hadn't been really factored into that as well when it was handed over to the Afghans. Just a reiteration of our mission, and talk about some of our advantages. Being so small, we were very agile, very flexible. We could change very easily. We established our SOPs very easily, and if we needed to change those SOPs, it happened quickly. We were able to develop and grow as a team very quickly. Even with our Croatian counterparts, what little time we had with them, we grew close to them very quickly. That was good. Being such a small team, I think that benefited us greatly. We could play either the US or the NATO card, whatever leveraged our mission best. That was always beneficial to us. For example, during Ramadan, all the US advisors that left Camp Span were supposed to go out in their full battle rattle. So the IBA, Kevlar, everything. Now to us, as in we did our own mission analysis, I think that sent the wrong message to our the people we were mentoring, that we didn't trust them, that we didn't feel we had full faith in them. And many of them would report that to us when they saw the other US soldiers doing that. So we could pull the part that we were with Croatia, and Croatians aren't doing it, so we aren't. We leveraged that. Now we didn't just go out without any protection whatsoever. We made sure we had a guardian angel with us. We took proper precautions to make sure that we were safe. But at the same time, we wanted to leverage that to the advantage of the mission as much as possible. Also, we could do logistics missions from our mall. This is where we put the U.S. cargo. Because when we were U.S., we had more freedom. We could come and go from Camp Span as we wanted, Croatians actually, in order to leave and go out on any mission, they required an official order from the Croatian headquarters in Kabul. But if they were coming and augmenting us, it was the U.S. mission they were just supporting. So we leveraged that as much as we could. It was a brand new Afghan National Army, so we had nowhere to go but up. They had recently been fielded. They had been fielded in April, so just about, March, so 2 months before we got there. They were very, very new, very hungry to learn. They were lacking a lot of equipment, but we could do the best we could. And everything they learned, they were excited to learn. They were still excited to be a part of the military, and we could leverage that as much as possible. So it was nice. We could see quick hits, a lot of quick gains. There was a lot of low-hanging fruit that we could address and deal with right away. So even in the short time we were there, 4 months, we were able to accomplish quite a bit in that 4 month time frame. We were resourced really well. With a small group, we were able to get a lot of weapons and vehicles and equipment that larger organizations had a hard time justifying the density of that with. I think on every vehicle we had 5 MATVs. 3 would primarily go out on a mission. We always had 2 as a backup. We had crew systems on 3 of those. We had AT4s. We had more than a combat load on every mission worth of ammo that we could take with us, which was very beneficial. Whenever we left the bar, we felt very secure because of that. Because we were such a small group and we had to provide our own security, I think that benefited us greatly. Some of our challenges. This is the motley crew that I worked with. That is my interpreter, Hidayat. That is myself. That is Captain Bashir, one of his lieutenants, and 2 of his sergeants. Captain Bashir had actually been a soldier in the Russian Army when they had control of Afghanistan, and then had been booted out when the Taliban took over, and now he's back. He was actually a very knowledgeable logistics officer. He knew exactly what needed to be done. He was very smart. Unfortunately, the logistical administrative support for the Afghan National Army was very weak. They didn't have, we tried to impose U.S. doctrine on them, but they didn't necessarily have the infrastructure to support that. When you talk about logistics, you talk about the just-in-time theory of ordering. If they don't have the trucks and the roads to support a just-in-time system, it doesn't benefit them. We sat for 7 months, so the unit, the Alma prior to us, and then into my Alma being there, 2 months into my Alma being there, with a bunch of cargo and equipment that had been ordered, sat at the Pakistani border, would not be allowed in. So that was a big challenge. So that meant no bunks, no ammo for their weapons. As you're trying to train them, that's always a difficulty. We had no howitzers. Tried training a field artillery company with no howitzers. Fuel was difficult to come by. A lot of it had to do with corruption. If you could get fuel and siphon it and sell it on the black market, you can make good money doing that. And so a lot of people do that. It was heavily controlled. It was very difficult for us to get fuel because of that, for legitimate training that we were trying to do. On top of that, tribalism was still in effect in a lot of areas, even within the Corps and the battalion. There's a lot of, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine when it came to actually distributing equipment as it came in. Howitzers are a good example. This is one I really had to fight for, but it benefited us in the long run. We had 4 howitzers come in. They were going to send it off to a battalion that already had 4 howitzers. Now they're authorized 8, so they could send them to them. But as I pointed out, my battalion had 0. Why not give us the 4, and then the next 4 that come in and send it off to that battalion that needs the full 8? They give us something to work with. And it took me a month and a half of finagling and working with our German mentors and counterparts, and then as well as working the Afghan channels to get that to happen. Language barrier was difficult. I had a very good interpreter. In fact, all of our interpreters were very good when it came to working with the Afghan National Army. Working with Croatians was difficult. English was supposed to be the primary language. A lot of them did not speak it very well or weren't comfortable speaking it. Most of them understood English very well. A good chunk of their pop culture comes from the United States or the BBC. So they understood it very well, but they weren't comfortable speaking it. For the most part, that wasn't a hindrance, but if we ever had one of them on the radio that didn't speak English very well, it just made it that much more difficult to correspond with them when we were trying to run our mission. Cultural differences. With the Afghans, every Friday they were off. We had Ramadan in the middle of our time there, so that limited the amount of time we could spend with them. Many of them were tired. And it isn't just Ramadan that they're unavailable or it limits their time with us, but then there's Eid afterwards, and so many of them travel far away to get home for Eid, and then they'll come back. So that easily took out a good month of the time that we could spend that training and working with them as advisors. And as I mentioned earlier, some of the tribal restrictions or religious restrictions, as they were incorporated into the military organization, tribalism in and of itself is very difficult for us to work around because we're not necessarily used to that, not to the extent we saw there. With Croatians, very top-down military structures. I mentioned before, they needed an official order from Kabul before they could leave post or do anything. So their military is very much structured as it reminds me a lot of the technician program in Minnesota National Guard. They work 40 hours a week and no more. Even in a combat zone, 40 hours only. No more than that. They
Take a break at 9:15 and 1:30 or 2 o'clock.
That's not all that unusual.
They
Danes
would've-
keep track of overtime, so do the Brits. I mean, they'll keep working, but in your case, you
Well,
said
and
it
it's
was.
not uncommon with a lot of European
Yeah.
countries.
Yeah.
Norwegians do as well. We are actually the exception to the rule. But we also do 20 years and you can retire out. This is a career for life. We had a guy who was a private, I want to guess he was in his late 40s, early 50s. But he made a good income, he was happy doing it, he didn't want any responsibility. And every day he could take breaks and play ping pong. So it was that version of playing cards like you see at the Camp Redwood. So stop at 10 o'clock for that, play ping pong. They also got a, I don't know if this came from the United Nations, but they also got a €90 a day bonus. So they got paid very well. It was for considering their pay scale and also knowing the Croatian conversion rate. €90 a day is a lot for them. For a Norwegian or a German, it's a nice bonus, but it's not great. For a Croatian, that's a huge sum of money. And so there was a lot of clamoring and a lot of deals going on to go on these deployments so they could get that money.
They still want to take your English test.
That's right.
Loaned equipment. We loaned out a ton of equipment to our allied partners. And I, being the logistics officer there, and so I speak to this more personally, I was the property book officer for all the equipment to the Croatians. Thankfully, my predecessors had taken very good books and annotated everything very well. But we loaned them this equipment. They didn't necessarily have the mechanics or the know-how to fix that equipment, and so a lot of times they've taken and done the best they could. And that's a lot of that's what they're used to in their military is they get the equipment and they'll replicate it or they will fix it as best they can, but it's not necessarily to a certain standard. It's definitely not to the U.S. standard. So they were doing repairs on that were not necessarily authorized repairs. That was difficult because I couldn't provide oversight to that, especially the equipment in Spain I could keep a hold of very well, and I keep an eye on that. But over in Marmal, and there was a Croatian group over there with majority of equipment. I think it was 30 plus Humvees they had. I could not keep tabs on that 24/7. So that was just a big challenge. Before I go on to Call of Duty, does anybody have any questions about the time advising the Afghans? Like I said, it was a limited amount of time. We were there for 4 months. We saw some good successes. We saw some good gains. There's a lot of potential there. Without the logistical support that they needed, I don't know how much they're going to be able to execute on that. So, any questions on that piece before I talk about Call of Duty a little bit? All right, we got to see Call of Duty. Has anybody been to Fort Monroe before? Trade Out Command? Yes. Was there USREX based out of there, and so is Cadet Command.
Used to be, not anymore, though.
Correct, they're all at Fort Knox now, but when they were open, and I think now they're turning beachfront property now.
It's owned by the state of Virginia, and so it was opened up for real estate development, yeah.
So, so you've been to Fort Monroe, do you recognize this shape?
Yeah, looks like Fort Monroe.
So Fort Monroe as a fort has a moat around it, and it's almost the exact same shape. They call it a turtle fort. So it looks like a turtle, which I thought was interesting because this is something that's been there for thousands of years in Afghanistan. So College Ungi. Let's see here. After the fall of Mazar-i-Sharif, it was used as a POW camp for the Taliban. So the Taliban was kept there, and that was early November of 2001. On November 25th, a POW there had somehow gotten a hold of a grenade. Now there's stories that say he was able to get it off one of the guards. There's stories that say that he actually snuck it in and they weren't screened very well. But one of the POWs actually had a grenade, threw it at some of the guards, and then after the ensuing chaos, was all the POWs were actually able to break free. Ensuing gunfire happened, and that's when we had our first combat death in Afghanistan with CIA agent Johnny Mike Spann, who Camp Spann is named after. Now the Taliban, after they'd broken away from the POW yard, and they had the POW yard right next to the armory, they broke into the armory, and they holed themselves up in there, and they had all the weapons and ammo they would need to hold themselves up for a long time. And so initially the goal was to have the Afghans take back that area. And so we were encouraging the Afghans, and they weren't able to do it. We sent in special forces, and they were just so holed up that special forces couldn't do it. And so the plan then is that we were just gonna drop a JDAM on them. Unfortunately, the coordinates to drop the JDAM were put in wrong, and the JDAM actually landed here near the commander's home. So if you get a chance, National Geographic has a great documentary on this, but it goes into depth as far as like how on one hand it showed the capabilities of the U.S. forces and how those capabilities can get out of hand and what they can do when they're not controlled. So what they ended up doing with the Afghans is they ended up breaking a water pipe and flooding out the entire armory.
Nice.
And that's a way. So we had a chance to go to College Ungi. We took advantage of that. So this is actually taken from the south end. This picture was taken up on this ridge line right here. You can see the armory right here. This white thing you see right here is actually dome to a memorial for Mike Spann. And we're able to go down into the armory itself. It still had the links down there. It still had brass down there. It hadn't been cleaned up. There's a lot of, you can still see where the water damage was. Here's the memorial for Johnny Spann, and this is the POW yard. And within the POW yard, there was human bones that we found just laying there in the ground. There was bits of weapons and stuff that were still there. Finally, I'd like to talk about our interpreters. So we left unexpectedly. I want to say unexpectedly, but it was shorter notice than we expected. Our interpreters then were out of a job. And I talk about this in terms of my interpreter, Hidayat, who grew very close to in that short amount of time. As many of you know, during that time frame, there was a lot of blue on green attacks. As far as I'm concerned, there's a part of me that feels I owe him my life. Now, what happened to him after we left is that he was out of job. He'd worked for the U.S. military for 7 years. He would describe some of the dreams he had and how he'd wake up in cold sweats, and it was nothing shy of PTSD. He had nowhere to go, so he had to go live with his family in that time frame. We'd submitted for his special interpreter's visa. It was a 2-year wait. He'd already been going for a year. He waited another solid year before he actually got his special interpreter's visa through. In that time frame, he lived with his family who lived just outside of Kabul. Anytime we'd leave his house, if we ran into anybody, They referred to him as a spy, they referred to him as a traitor. So he just stopped leaving his house. My gift to him before I left is I gave him my old iPhone. I had it jailbroken within 24 hours. And he and I would message back and forth over Facebook while he was over there, while he was in Afghanistan. And we talked about just how threatened he was. He wouldn't leave unless it was the middle of the night. That was the only time he would leave the house, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning. Sometime we knew there'd be nobody else around, because that's the only time he felt safe. I ended up contacting my local congressman to try and get something done. I contacted the U.S. Embassy. The only congressman who responded was Senator Franklin's office. And Senator Franklin's office actually followed up, and every month they would contact the embassy as well, just to ask about it. And I don't know if that helped or not. He did get to the United States quicker than most of the other interpreters that I've stayed in touch with, which is beneficial. But then he comes to the United States, and that's it. Like he gets support for maybe a few months, and then after that, he's on his own. Right now, he has a job working delivering bagels, but he doesn't have an education. My wife is an advisor in Normandale. She understands the academic system very well. She's working with him over the phone as best she can to try and help get him into some courses to get his GED and then eventually go on to college. But I do think that we look at the support we've gotten from our interpreters and the sacrifices they've made. And I guess my own personal question, and this is just me speaking, is are we showing them the benefits? Are we showing them the help that maybe they've earned? Otherwise, he's healthy and living in New York. And this is him this last Eid. He went to the Statue of Liberty. That is my presentation. Gentlemen, any questions?
Ryan, did his family follow him to the United States?
They're still in Afghanistan.
And why did he pick New York?
I think
He knew somebody there, another interpreter or something?
he didn't know anybody there, sir. He had a choice between New York or California. He initially was going to go to California, and I think it was San Francisco Bay Area for California. And he talked to the person who he was going to have to work with there, and I think the person just kind of rubbed him the wrong way. They didn't feel he was actually there to help him out. It was more for his own personal benefit. And so he decided not to go there, and he took a chance on New York instead. Any other questions? Thank you for your time.